Greetings, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. I'm outside Chiswick House in London. So I know it might be spelled Chiswick, but pronounced Chiswick. So this is a stately home which was built for Boyle, that's a surname, the Earl of Burlington in 1729. The surname of a nobleman and his title very seldom match. The title usually comes from the place where he owns his major estate. So the Earl of Burlington, he also owned extensive land in Ireland. So then it passed to one of his relatives, the Duke of Devonshire, the 5th Duke. And the 5th Duke is more famous for who he was married to, Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire. You probably seen the film about her, The Duchess, with Keira Knightley in the title role. This 5th Duchess of Devonshire, she's subject to that renowned biography by Amanda Foreman, published in 1998. So the Duchess of Devonshire, she was very well known as a Whig hostess. The two political parties in the United Kingdom at the time were the Whigs and the Tories, and her family were Whigs. The thing is, her husband, he was a very diffident, retiring sort. He was fascinated by things, not people, had a technical mind, not big on interpersonal skills. So she had to fulfill much of his political role and went around campaigning for him, even kissing tradesmen to persuade them to vote their way, not kissing them on the tradesmen's, I hasten to add. So she was very active in those circles. And she notoriously had a torrid affair with the Honourable Charles Grey, later Earl Grey, and so she gave birth to his daughter, but this was very much hushed up, and their child was raised by other people, and the Duchess of Devonshire was able to visit her daughter, but never to vouchsafe to this child that she was the mother of this child, just claimed that she was a charitable person who cared for this child. So that Duchess of Devonshire, she did have two daughters with the Duke, and indeed eventually a son. So her paramour, Earl Grey, he later became Prime Minister. Earl Grey of the Reform Bill, as we know, the Representation of the People Act 1832, he was a prime mover behind that. So that Duchess of Devonshire is very upset about her husband, the Duke of Devonshire, having an extramarital liaison with her best friend. And of course she was very hurt that her friend poached her husband effectively. So if you've seen that film, in some ways it's superb, it's a visual feast and quite faithful to history. There are other bits where it's rather misleading. Yes, she was 17 when she got married, and the Duke was 26 when they got married. The film makes him appear to be middle-aged, because he's played by Ranulph Fiennes, who's much older than 26 at that time. But indeed, Keira Knightley was rather over the age of 17 when she starred in that film. Anyway, so it passed out of the hands of the Devonshire family, and many crowned heads have been here. Tsar Nicholas I, the Shah of Persia has stayed here, various prime ministers such as Gladstone have stayed here, American presidents, John Quincy Adams, for instance, he spent at least one night here. And then it was used as a mental hospital from 1892, and eventually sold to Middlesex County Council. So most of what's now Greater London was called Middlesex. The county of Middlesex has effectively disappeared. We still have places like West Middlesex Hospital, Middlesex University here, well, and indeed in Dubai. But in 1889, the Local Government Act created Greater London, and Middlesex largely disappeared. Someone like Chiswick, this would have been considered a town in the county of Middlesex, and Middlesex has gone, really, just been absorbed into Greater London. So well worth visiting. You'll like the price. It's gratis, and it's built in the style of Palladio, that incredibly influential 17th century Italian architect. And this was obviously the early 18th century, when Italy, and indeed France, was seen to be the pinnacle of taste. It was the height of neoclassicism, so this really was the bee's knees if you're a self-respecting aristocrat. We're not far from the River Thames. There's the Duke's Meadows, as in the Duke of Devonshire. That's the grassy land, never put under the plough, between here and the river, because it was prone to flooding, so it's a bit of a flood defence. You could have cattle there. There's no point in planting crops because it might well be inundated. The Thames used to flood a lot more in the old days because we didn't have various relief barriers, or we didn't have the that channel. The Thames Flood Relief Barriers about 1980. We didn't have these various channels and things like that. We couldn't predict these things. Anyway, look at some of these columns just here and up there. I'm not sure you can see from this angle. These sphinxes, because these are early 19th century. when there was this mania for all things ancient Egyptian, even before Howard Carter, right after Napoleon and his savant went there to Egypt, people were scintillated by ancient Egypt. That's why they kept on digging until 1924, whenever it was. So, and then if you have a closer look, you'll see these various statues, busts of people in ancient Roman styles, wearing wreaths around their heads. So I don't think they're figures from Whig history, but talking about the Whig Party, well, they didn't have an ideology as such. There was no checklist of beliefs exactly. They didn't publish any credo. It's not until 1834 that even the Tory party produced the Tamworth Manifesto. But what they believe in, broadly speaking, well, they're certainly in favour of the Hanoverians, okay, George I and so on. The Tories were suspected of being pro-Jacobite, only a few of them were. The Whigs tend to think that the Church of England should go easier on dissenters, that's to say Protestants outside the Church of England, like Quakers, Baptists, Plymouth Brethren, eventually Methodists. The Whigs were deeply prejudiced against Roman Catholics, who were discriminated against by law. But the two parties, well, you couldn't put a cigarette paper between them in the early days on certain issues, believing that, yes, that grandees should dominate. It was for the landed classes to control everything. Now, I know they say that the Tory party stood more for the landed interest and the Whig party more for the moneyed interest. Towards the end of the Tory-Whig party system, there was a bit of that, but obviously many Whig luminaries were major landowners, like the Duke of Devonshire. He's got a lot of land, well, not just so much in Devon, but more Derbyshire. That's where Chatsworth House is his principal seat, and they say this was sort of grander than Buckingham Palace in the ceremonial there. What else? So, more amenable to reform, particularly towards the end of time, only after the French Revolution, to become of them and start saying, well, no, we all have to have serious reform and allow quite a few people to vote. Remember, until 1832, something like 5% of men had the right to vote. They were seen as more sophisticated, more interested in mainland Europe. The Tories were more just Tufton, Bufton types, country bumpkins who thought that they were the salt of the earth, genuine, felt that the Whigs were effete, too cosmopolitan, and too eager to embroil the United Kingdom in foreign wars. This did flip a bit in the Napoleonic Wars, and the Whigs were more dovish and saying, well, could we negotiate? And the Tories were saying, no, more or less, let's fight to the finish. But obviously there was a bit of political cross-dressing and them swapping on issues as time went on. And it wasn't always clear who was a Whig, who was a Tory, since there was no membership roll, and there were some members of Parliament who were the King's friends, who would support the government of the day, whatever it was, because of course the King had untrammeled powers of patronage, could appoint people, promote, demote, sack in the army, the navy, the established churches, the universities, quite a few schools, the civil service, the diplomatic corps, you name it. Obviously didn't really mind about the bottom positions. There were tens of thousands of them, but the top positions, what he said went. So perhaps that's enough about Chiswick House. There's some gorgeous Italian gardens here, so very much a place to come. An island of tranquility, although in a rather leafy and agreeable suburb of Chiswick in the west part of London. So they are very extensive grounds of various things going on here from time to time, such as son et lumière. Okay, so I shall switch it off now.